I see the images on TV. People's livelihoods are being destroyed. Businesses are being burned down. No problem. And then we have a dust-up at the Capitol. Well, there's nothing burned down. And we're not going to talk about, we're going to make that a major deal. I just think it's kind of two standards. And if we apply the same standard and we're going to be reasonable with each other, let's have a discussion. That's all it was. Let's have a discussion.
Boy, those are some pretty controversial comments, right? That was Washington Commanders. I still can't believe that's their stupid name now. That's the Washington Commanders defensive coordinator, Jack Del Rio. No big deal, except for that he was fined $100,000, apologized, and deleted his social media account. Joining me now, Michael Knowles, of course, of the Great Michael Knowles Show. And he's also author of the book Speechless, Controlling Words, Controlling Minds. Michael, how did they manage to gain so much control of what we're allowed to say and what we're not? He didn't say a single thing there that would be unpopular to 70% of the population, yet he's not allowed to say it. How?
I'm shocked to hear you say that, Jesse. I am literally shaking. You can't see me literally shaking, but metaphorically, I am literally shaking at that statement. He says it was a dust-up at the Capitol, and he compares it to BLM. Capitol, the Capitol people didn't kill anybody, and of course BLM killed dozens of people, and it lasted for months and months, not hours, and they attacked multiple federal buildings and burned half the country down. So yes, there really is no comparison here. Not only was January 6th not the worst insurrection in American history, it was not the worst insurrection in the history of that year. And by the way, speaking of history, this is not going to come up at the January 6th hearings, but let's not forget, there have been many actual attacks on the Capitol in American history. 1915, you had a Harvard professor blow up the Senate reception room with explosives, blow the thing up. 1954, you had Puerto Rican activists shoot up the House of Representatives, injured 5 congressmen. 1971, you had the Weather Underground blow up another portion of the Senate, again with explosives. 1983, you had a different left-wing group, the Armed Resistance Unit, blow up a different portion of the Senate. And then on January 6th, you had the horn hat guy dance around the Capitol Rotunda and a few Midwest dads crack a Coors Light. So there's no comparison here.
Taking selfies.
Taking selfies in front of Pelosi's office or whatever. And so there's obviously no comparison. And yet, truly, if you polled, I would say 100 moderate, centrist to center-left people today, they would tell you in sincerity that January 6th was the worst thing that's ever happened. So how did it happen? Because this has been drilled into us by every single cultural institution, especially education, especially the media. But then you see there are real carrots and real sticks here. When you have to pay a $100,000 fine, that's real money. When you're deplatformed from the public square, which is what social media is now in our republic, those are real serious consequences. And so people are not only going to be censored by the oligarchs in big tech and in the bureaucracy, they're going to censor themselves. And when we censor ourselves, we pave the way for the next predations of these cultural revolutionaries.
Michael, how are we supposed to overcome that as a country because you just described something I've talked about too. I know you talk about it all the time. When you have all these people, they live entirely in a world of make-believe, right? Because they're in the media, political, university bubble. Okay, so they believe a bunch of things, as Reagan once said, that aren't true, that aren't real. They live in a world of make-believe. How am I supposed to come together with people who reside in a world that is not real? How does a nation overcome that?
Well, you can't. In order to have a republic, you have to have something in common. Republic comes from the phrase res publica, meaning the stuff that we've got all together. And so if we don't have anything in common, we don't have a republic anymore. And in order to have a republic, you need to speak the same language. This is why free speech is not just some minor issue, one issue among many like immigration and taxes or something. Free speech in self-government is pretty much the whole political order, because the way that we govern ourselves is by speaking and persuading one another and having debates and then deciding how we want to live. And so it's no accident, it's no fluke that the libs have managed to focus on this issue of speech, because if they can control the words that we use. And not even necessarily in the manner of censorship and saying we're going to deplatform you if you use this word, but even in changing the very definitions of words, changing the definition of marriage, changing the definition of American, changing the definition of man and woman. If they can do that, then what takes place is a sort of pre-censorship. They actually censor your thoughts before you can form them and have the opportunity to speak. If when I think of a man or a woman, I am actually prevented from thinking of a real man or a real woman, and I am forced by the way that we speak in our culture to think of a man as a woman or vice versa. I think of a foreign national as an undocumented American or something like that. My mind has already been controlled before I even have the impulse to state my opinion.
Michael, what's the game with January 6th, the whole committee thing? Is this an effort to stop Trump because they're scared of him? Is this just an effort to intimidate people on the right into more silence so they can continue this? Or there's a game here. Everyone knows it. What is it?
Well, this is entirely about stopping Trump because despite their protestations that Joe Biden's the most popular president in history and won 87 bazillion votes, more people voted for him than are currently on planet Earth or whatever. No, they think that Trump is still a very potent threat. This is why you had left-wing groups dragging Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance, to court to try to get her booted off of the ballot because of some preposterous misreading of the provisions of the law. They did that. It was laughed out of court, but they did it because they felt that they couldn't beat Marjorie Taylor Greene in an election when she's actually on the ballot. And that was really just a test run for Donald Trump. The other reason they have to focus on January 6th, the worst day in American history, is because they've got nothing else that they can possibly run on. Obviously, the economy's in shambles, inflation at record highs, illegal immigration at record highs, first major war in Europe since World War II. You just go down the list and it's misery after misery. The one issue they previously had was public health. They were still above water there. They are now well below water there. Dr. Fauci has practically gone into witness protection. So they truly have nothing they can possibly run on. And so they've got to bring back the images of that terrible old orange man who almost overthrew the government. They're making weak arguments for that. I don't think it's persuading a lot of people. And frankly, when you look at $7 a gallon gas, I think people are going to be looking a little more fondly on the days of that mean old orange man.
Don't miss Jesse Kelly Breaks History, Che Guevara, the latest episode of a new series available now exclusively for First TV supporters. Visit the First TV app or thefirsttv.com to subscribe and start watching today.